For decades, global naval supremacy has been defined by one massive piece of hardware, the American aircraft carrier. These enormous vessels act as fully equipped floating air bases, allowing the U.S. military to project force across the globe. Right now, that capability is heavily concentrated in the waters surrounding China, specifically the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. Beijing claims nearly all of these surrounding waters as its own sovereign territory. To secure that claim and dictate what happens off its own coastline, China needs to dominate this maritime zone. The problem is that U.S. carriers never travel alone. They are surrounded by a formidable defensive ring of destroyers, cruisers, and submarines. Traditional short-range missiles or torpedoes simply cannot slip past these defenses to get close enough for a strike. To gain control over its coastal waters, China had to engineer a completely different method to neutralize the American naval advantage.
Surprisingly, the testing ground for this ocean-based solution isn't anywhere near the water. It is located over 1,000 miles inland, right in the middle of the unforgiving sandy expanse of the Taklamakan Desert. Recently, satellite imagery captured something completely out of place in this barren landscape: life-size structures built directly into the sand, matching the exact dimensions of United States warships. The layout perfectly mimics specific vessels in the U.S. fleet, including the highly distinct shape of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, complete with precise locations for the bridge and missile launch systems. These structures serve as the world's most elaborate and specific target practice range, built to perfect strikes against American naval assets on dry land. Back in 2020, this site looked very different. The initial test targets were simple: two-dimensional outlines of aircraft carriers drawn onto the desert floor. These outlines were used to test a specialized weapon, the Dongfeng 21D ballistic missile. It was fired high into the atmosphere to come crashing down onto a fixed, static GPS coordinate. In actual combat, a nuclear-powered warship is a moving target, traveling at high speeds across the open ocean, making a static coordinate test insufficient for real-world simulation. So the testing evolved. The flat targets were replaced by three-dimensional mock-ups covered in dozens of tall vertical metal poles. This schematic illustrates the theory behind those poles. Defense analysts believe they act as radar reflectors, designed to perfectly mimic the complex metallic signature of a real naval vessel. This allows the missile's payload to track its target on the way down by sending out active radar pings. This proves the weapon utilizes a maneuverable re-entry vehicle, allowing it to actually adjust its course in midair to hunt down a specific radar signature. That mid-flight agility makes standard defense protocols highly vulnerable. Traditional U.S. surface-to-air systems are designed to intercept predictable, arcing flight paths, and they struggle to react quickly enough to a warhead that is actively dodging and swerving at supersonic speeds. But the most elaborate target site takes this a step further. Deep in the desert, there is a full-scale aircraft carrier mock-up mounted directly onto a set of train tracks. What is particularly strange is how these tracks are laid out. In a completely flat wasteland with zero natural obstacles, the rails take sharp twists and long sweeping curves. This overlay compares those desert tracks with naval data, and it shows an exact match. The rails perfectly replicate the turning radius and evasive maneuvers a real aircraft carrier would execute to dodge an incoming strike. Maintaining a lock on a target that is speeding away and aggressively swerving, all while plummeting from the edge of space at thousands of miles per hour, is an incredibly difficult engineering feat. Yet recent satellite images of the impact zones show scorch marks and debris, confirming that the Chinese military is successfully hitting these track-mounted targets. These successful tests demonstrate that the technical hurdles of tracking and striking a moving ship have been cleared. The carrier-killer missile is a functioning reality. China is testing its most advanced weapon systems out in the open, fully visible to foreign satellites, and that exposure is deliberate. Proving to the world that the weapon works is actually more valuable than keeping its exact specifications a secret. It is a textbook example of strategic deterrence. This specific map shows how the missile forces U.S. commanders into a corner. They must keep carriers outside the weapon's maximum range. But pushing the fleet out means their fighter jets lack the fuel capacity to reach conflict zones and return safely. By creating an area denial bubble along its coast, China effectively limits the primary utility of the U.S. Navy's most powerful asset. This shift in naval geography has immediate consequences on the ground. In flashpoints like Taiwan, the calculation for defense relies heavily on swift American intervention. Now, regional allies are being forced to prepare for combat scenarios where U.S. naval support could be severely delayed or held back entirely. What started as simple shapes drawn in the sand has evolved into an active weapons program that dictates where foreign fleets can and cannot sail. By building and destroying fake ships in an empty desert, China is securing its coastal waters and shifting the balance of global power without ever having to fire a shot in combat.